Okay, so we're talking about the background of Abraham's call, right? And, you know, maybe you didn't realize that Genesis 10 and Genesis 11 are just the background to Abraham's calling. uh, they're treated usually as separate things. And it's not all just Abraham's calling, it's God's work to continue to establish his everlasting covenant and bring forth the seed to whom all the promises are made, and who is going to accomplish the work of redemption. You know, man has no right to exist. You got to get this. We do not have a right to exist on this planet. You say, well, he gave us dominion and it's ours and blah, blah, blah. Well, God said he repented that he made man and decided to destroy him with the flood. And it was a dispensation of mercy for God to say, but I'm going to preserve Noah. He's found grace in my sight, and through him I'm going to preserve the seed so that I can continue to fulfill what I said I would do. Now, when I say we don't have a right to exist, we do. It's righteous from God's point of view. But you just have to realize that every human being you meet is living under the mercy of God for Christ's sake. The only reason the story continues after the flood, is because of Christ. That's the focus. So, yes, it's the background of Abram's call, and how God worked to separate Abram out, to keep things pure. And you can see the enemy's tactic always is to try to pollute, to seduce God's people, draw them away from their land, for their inheritance. And Christ is our good land and he's our inheritance today. Abraham had a real land. And on the one hand, there was Babel and cities like Nineveh and Ur the Chaldees, which is all part of the same system, or the world system, that held Abraham back from where he was supposed to go, in a sense. And on the other hand, the enemy, while he was being held back, was populating the good land with the Canaanites, and it all came through Ham. Both Nimrod and his system and the Canaanites and their infiltration and opposition come from Ham. And what was Ham's issue? It's really the same as Cain. He despised the object of God's grace. Noah really was the object of God's grace. To be an object of God's grace, on the one hand, is to be someone who receives mercy and grace. But you become a conduit of the grace, and you become a vessel. You have authority. As a believer, we have authority. We've been made ambassadors of Christ. What kind of authority? To tear down or build up? Well, to build up. Whether we use it or not is one thing, but it's in us. The almond rod that budded represented the resurrection life. Remember, the sons of Korah rebelled against Aaron and said, we can speak, we can do this, we can do that. Why is God appointing him? Why did he use him as the vessel to establish his covenant? Him and Moses. God said, put your rods down. All the leaders of the Korah tribe and Aaron put their rods down. And Aaron's rod budded an almond, which means resurrection life. His dead staff brought forth life. That is his authority. And again, the rod was put in with the Ark of the Testimony, because the testimony and resurrection life go together. If you have the testimony of Jesus Christ, you are a representative of God's move to establish his covenant in the earth. And I'm not talking about dominionism. I'm talking about the gospel. When you preach the gospel, when we speak the word of truth, we are speaking God's testimony concerning his Son. And that is the speaking from heaven. That is the voice that we are commanded to obey. So it's not that you and I have authority, nor did Noah necessarily have authority. But to be an object of grace means we do have authority invested in us, God's authority behind what we do in grace. And those who oppose it run into issues with God. Not those who oppose us, those who oppose the truth. You can be for the truth and just not like a person. Paul and Barnabas had to separate, over Mark because of he was high maintenance, and Paul doesn't seem to have been very compassionate. But the truth is, that stuff can happen. That's just personality stuff. But what Ham did was to expose the sins of Noah, and it wasn't even sin. See, that's the thing. He cast shame on Noah's nakedness, and yet Noah's nakedness in his tent was fine before God. You say, well, he was drunk. Yeah, but he was drunk from the produce of his vineyard, which is a good work. I don't know that that's necessarily a sin, but Ham treated it like it's a sin and said, I got to expose this to the brothers. And it was because he despised the vessel of God's grace. It's a serious thing. And out of Ham then came Canaan and Nimrod, which is Babel to seduce God's people out into the world and try to mix up with them and get them out of the land, right? That's really what Babel represents. It's an alternative to the new city Jerusalem. And remember, it's got a false Christ. It's got a religious root. It's the hard taskmaster. It's where all of our Babylon is where we get all of our bad doctrine that hurts us and keeps us from enjoying grace, which is our good land. Keeps us from enjoying Christ because it obscures our view of him. And then once we're in the land, even if we do want to take it, it's populated with Canaanites. That's all from Ham. It's a big deal to despise who God uses and why, and what he's doing through the vessel because you don't like the package it's presented in. We have to see beyond. Ham had to see beyond Noah in his tent, which he shouldn't have even known about that. That's Noah's, that's called judging someone unrighteously, really. Pharisees did it. They called Jesus all kinds of things. Said he was a drunkard and a winebibber and a friend of sinners, glutton. Imposing ordinances, imposing rules that really have no bearing on your righteousness or your heart, but you're judged in Babylon's world as being unrighteous according to their hard taskmaster. And then in the good land, you've got the Canaanites. And that's, I really believe, represents for us the leftovers of all the garbage that we inherited from Babel. See, they come from the same source, right? Babel and the Canaanites both come from Ham. And they're based on accusations. And this reminds me, well, it doesn't remind me, I was already thinking about it. I had a dream last night that I shared with some friends. I didn't think it was spiritual, it was just a bad dream. But it was weird, so I was like, I'm going to share it because I remember every detail, and I usually don't remember dreams. But anyway, backstory is I'm trying to get an e-bike to get some exercise. And they're like a picture of grace because you lightly pedal, but you're getting exercise. But the motor is doing the work. It's like the people mover on the at the airport where it carries you, and if you walk forward, you're going really fast. So it makes it exhilarating and fun, which means you're going to do it more. And so I test rode one the other day, and it was just wonderful. So I'm hoping to get one. Anyway, I had a dream last night that I went to go get an e-bike, which, again, I already have felt like is like a picture of grace. You think you're pedaling, you're being strengthened, you're being fortified by the experience, but God's doing the work, and you're sailing along smiling, going much further than you could go on a regular bike if you were doing all the work. I mean, I went 5 miles on my test run. I thought I'd gone a mile. And I haven't ridden a bike in years, and I'm so out of shape, so it was amazing. But Anyway, in the dream, I'm going to get this thing. And I go to the bike shop, and I'm talking to the manager about buying a bike. And I don't know what she said, but it was like an angry refusal. I was not going to get a bike. And she wasn't going to tell me why. And so I go back to my car because I'm like, well, I'll go get another e-bike. I'll go to another store. But meanwhile, the owner of the shop, while I was talking to that person, was out in the back parking lot loading up my car with tons and tons and tons of stuff that didn't fit. It was physically impossible that it would have even fit in there. And it was odd parts like tractor parts, a piece of a crane. It was all this garbage that my car was absolutely full of. And no, a crane could not fit in my car, but it was a dream, okay? And I'm like, what am I going to do with all this? And he goes, you're going to take it to recycle on your way back. I want you to take it to this place. They're going to take it off your hands. I'm like, yeah, but there's no place on my way home. He's like, well, there's one 40 minutes east of here. It'll be 40 minutes out of your way. And he's angrily telling me that I have to carry all this garbage someplace, which means I can't get the bike, because my car's full, and it ruins my whole day and puts me on a detour. And so he goes inside, and he's all angry too. So I angrily take all the stuff out of the car, and that took a long time, it's all heavy, and threw it on the parking lot. Meanwhile, I'm afraid he's going to be mad at me and I'm going to be in trouble. And I drive off, and that's the end of the dream. I'm like, boy, that was a weird dream, I told my friends, and they're like, well, it's obvious what it is. I'm like, what? It didn't even occur to me. They're like, you went to go get good food or good doctrine of grace. They didn't even know that I already knew that the e-bike was a picture of grace. I've already made that connection in my life. They're like, you went to go get grace, and they angrily refused to give it to you, and meanwhile loaded you up with all kinds of useless stuff that, by the way, looks useful. It was all productivity stuff, tractors and cranes and stuff like that looked like they could be tools, but they were a mismatch. They didn't even go together. It didn't make any sense. Now, in the dream, I do not remember why they wouldn't let me have a bike. I just remember them being angry and refusing it. Okay? That's a false Christ. That's an antichrist. When you're dealing with a teacher they're teaching you all kinds of stuff and you can't even remember what they teach, all you know is you're not getting grace, and they seem angry at you, you're going to get in trouble if you complain about it. What they're really doing, through all the garbage they're speaking, and you don't remember half of it, is loading your car up with useless things, and they want you to haul it around. And you feel obligated to. I felt like I was going to get in trouble. And that's what the Canaanites are. So me dumping all the stuff angrily is my righteous anger. I was right to dump all that stuff in his parking lot. I didn't have to carry that garbage. I didn't authorize him to put it in there. I didn't know he put it in there. He was putting it in there while that person was talking to me about why I couldn't have an e-bike. All the things that we have in grace, secured to us by the blood of Christ, obtained by faith, they're rightfully ours as heirs. The blessing, the fellowship, God working supernaturally in your life and supplying you, working all things together for your good, knowing him, being his friend, his son, an heir, knowing he's not angry at you, knowing he loves you, he's carrying you. That's all grace. That's that e-bike. But the teachers, we don't remember what they told us. I don't remember 99% of the sermons I've heard in the institutional churches. All I know is that it seemed like an angry refusal. And I came away thinking, I can't have grace. I can't have fellowship. I don't know why. You don't know why you're being robbed of your crown. You really don't know the specifics. If you did, you'd know what to watch out for. No, it's secret backloaded works, secret doctrines that they're loading your car up with, and you go out to your car, you're like, well, now I'm ready to move on, and you find you're completely bogged down with all their garbage. And it took me 10 years to theologically detox from all the institutional churches I was in and the cult and all this stuff. I spent, 10 years detoxing, 7 of it alone, like no church, 5 years, maybe 5 or 6 years, no church, by myself with a Bible, reading Romans 8, Romans 6, Colossians, with no commentaries, starting over from fresh. I didn't know what I had that was good or bad. I just knew it all needed to be dumped out because I couldn't move. And that's in that dream, I had to dump all that crap out to empty my car so I could go get an e-bike, which is the grace. This is, I believe, actually goes right into, Ham, because he despised the vessel of God's grace, sinned by exposing Noah to Japheth and Shem. And then out of his line comes Nimrod and the world system, Babel, with its false Christ, who's a hard taskmaster, and wants you to build your way up to heaven through works. And that seduces you long enough to keep you occupied, while meanwhile the Canaanites are populating the land. As long as Abraham was dragging his feet, the Canaanites were populating the land. It even says it. We'll see. We'll see it when we get to it. And that's how that guy, the owner of the shop, was out in the back loading up my car, while the guy's stalling, keeping me from my e-bike. And all I know is I can't have it for some reason. See, that's what you get in Babel, religious Babel. There's all these religious works, and for some reason you never get the fellowship, you never get the joy. And you're told you just can't, and you feel disqualified. Then when you finally realize, okay, this is the wrong place for me, they've got false doctrine, whatever, you think, I'll just leave that church and then I'll be fine. I'll go find another church. I'll find another e-bike store. But then when you get back to your car, you realize that that whole time, they were loading your car up with all the garbage, and you don't even know what it is. I didn't even know how to get some of that stuff out of my car. That was the thing. So it's really whether it was a dream from God or not, the interpretation is from God. And, that's the Canaanites. It's all the garbage in the land that's in us that the Lord has to overthrow. And what we'll see with Abraham is there was a process to get him out of the Babel and focused on going to the good land. But then once the people go to the good land, there's a process of driving out the enemies, and you have to do it angrily. I was angry throwing the stuff on the ground. You cannot make nice with Canaanites. You can't make nice with all this garbage you find in the back of your car. You're not going to be able to fit Grace in there, the other e-bike, until you throw all that stuff out. And it's going to be a process. Now, yesterday, or the day before, in my Genesis 11 message, I was talking about sanctification. Now, you guys know, if you've been around, I don't really believe in what most people look at as sanctification, which is becoming holier and holier and holier and holier by working on it and working on it and working on it. No. I believe that there is sanctification. Simply to abstain from fornication and hold your vessel in honor is good enough, really, as far as your part. And that's not a process. You're either not fornicating or you are fornicating. You're not, I'm a little less sanctified, more sanctified because I fornicate 50% less. No, you're either fornicating or you're not. Possess your vessel in honor. That's about the extent of what the Bible says of our part in sanctification. The rest of what it says about sanctification, it speaks of the blood of Christ and his perfect work on the cross, that he sanctified us. He's the one who purified us with his blood, and we are clean, and we are on the altar acceptable to God. We are holy and acceptable, and we're to present ourselves to him as holy and acceptable, as saints. But there is a process that seems related to sanctification and purification, which is called renewal. Renewal of the mind, washing of the water of the word, washing and renewal, and transformation comes from washing and renewing. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that specifically has to do, primarily, when you look through the scriptures in the New Testament, with taking the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, in that we cast down vain imaginations and that's a Babel, and every lofty thought, let's exalt ourselves to the heavens, let's open up a gate to heaven, every lofty thought that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. That's the Canaanites. We got to deal with the world system and our wrong views of Christ because of the imposter Baal Antichrist, who's the source of all the bad doctrines. And then we have to fight to bring our thoughts into obedience. That is related to being in the land and enjoying our portion. And that's why we wear armor. And it is warfare. What God's doing is a fight. To establish his covenant, there has to be a fight. And some people want us to be nice, but we can't be nice while we're fighting. We're not fighting with people. We're fighting against all the bad doctrine, and we have to angrily cast this stuff down. And it doesn't mean we're yelling at anybody or anything like that, but we are speaking the truth to be renewed and to be washed so that we can enjoy Christ. And that does yield real holiness, which we call sanctification. But it's not. We're already sanctified. Okay? But our enjoyment of Christ in the land, our enjoyment of the blessing of the gospel that is freely ours, the supply of the Spirit, the fellowship, knowing God, intimacy with him, and the joy it produces, and then fellowship with others based on that, is holiness. All the fruits of the Spirit are there, supplied automatically by God himself. But it seems like we're pedaling a little bit, and that's our e-bike. Now, an e-bike can really anger people. There's a phrase, apparently. People who ride regular bikes don't like e-bikes because, it's doing all the work. And what people say is, well, I can't hear you in my dust because you're going so fast towards And so what we need to get good at doing is not hearing the people in our dust. We are going to pass them by with smiles on their faces while they are toiling and sweating and groaning. And it's going to make them mad, rightfully so. If you're driving around in this thing that's bogged down with all this useless crap and you're taking it to the dump, they want you to distribute it. You're resentful, you're angry, you don't have what you want, you don't have what you went to get. Why are you carrying all this crap around now? That's the Christian life of most people. They're carrying around all this baggage, somebody else's baggage, and they need to throw it out. But while they're bogged down with all that stuff, and they look over to the lane next to them and see a guy riding on a bike sailing past him, and he's smiling, and it looks like he's barely doing anything. He seems to be moving his feet on the pedals, but the bike is just sailing past, and they got a smile on his face. Of course that's going to make them angry. Now, the fact that they're angry doesn't necessarily mean that this is not rightfully theirs, too. All they have to do is believe. That's all we're doing. But that's the extent of the analogy. That's as far as I can take it. But that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with, because I kept saying sanctification is a process, and you guys know I teach that sanctification is not a process. And when I'm looking at Noah, or Abraham, I'm talking about a sanctification, a separation work. To purge out Babel, to prepare him for the good land, and then ultimately it's through Israel that God deals with the Canaanites. Abraham can't even deal with that. It takes more than just one person to deal with Canaanites. It takes a multitude of voices to undo all the garbage in us. And so that's why God raises up the ministries. The ministries are part of the armor, teacher, evangelist, shepherd, prophet, apostle. And you've got to learn to discern who's actually a real one. How do you know? By the testimony of Christ. It's the only way to know. And you've got to know that testimony. And you got to know, is this guy putting a bunch of garbage in my back while his friend tells me that I can't have grace? Or am I supplied, watered, refreshed, renewed? Right? You'll know the difference. You won't know the difference if you keep staying at the bike shop. You do have to depart from the ones. If you're getting no grace, you got to get out of there. But you got to realize when you got the parking lot, there's a work to be done to dump all the stuff. Okay, actually, I was going to teach on Genesis and I didn't. This is an interlude message. I need to get moving here. I got some things to do. Take care.